I do not dislike The Illustrated Mum. As a fan of Jacqueline Wilson, there are very few of her that I don't get on with. But this one is definitely hailed as one of her finest, or certainly one of the most loved, and I have never understood the appeal. Certainly it's shocking, but for a younger reader, I feel like it's just maybe a little bit too dark and a bit too depressing. This one was released in 1999, and it's all about a young girl called Dolphin. Love her name, the name definitely sticks in the head, and she has a mother who is unwell. She is bipolar. I can't remember the exact phrasing the book used, but the book doesn't say her mother was bipolar. Some days she was happy and some days, she wasn't. It kind of doesn't explain it outright in a way that children wouldn't understand. It really just, Jacqueline Wilson very convincingly expresses her mother's emotions and the fluctuations in them without really going into any medical unnecessary detail for the young reader to understand, which is something that I thought was really good. And as well, this is something that children's books don't really do, but there could be readers, of course, whose parents are manic depressive, but there also could be children who are reading this whose parents show manic depressive tendencies, but nobody else has ever noticed it, and the child might actually begin to recognise what Marigold is going through, Dolphin's mother, in their own parents, and it could actually prove really helpful and beneficial for those in that situation. Hopefully there are not too many people like that, but that's something that not many children's books do, and I think that it's pretty powerful in that respect. It's called The Illustrated Mum because Marigold is absolutely covered in tattoos, and it's all about Dolphin feeling quite embarrassed by her mother, both by the way she looks with the tattoos and by the way she acts with quite erratic behaviour. And then things quickly go downhill and Dolphin's entire future becomes completely uncertain. I'm not going to say any more than that, but I will say that the scene, I say scene, I'll explain that in a moment, but the bit with the paint was, in the book, shocking, and the bit that I think made this really quite dark, and darker than pretty much every other Jacqueline Wilson book. There's just something about that. I'm almost welling up. I'm clinically depressed. I am somebody who pays a lot of attention to mental health and puts a lot of emphasis on it, and importance on it, and to think of Marigold painting herself, I won't say why or what triggers it, is hard for me to read as an adult. When I reread it, scary to read as a child. The reason that I said scene is because this has been adapted into a TV film with the fabulous Alice Connor as Dolphin. I loved Alice Connor in The Worst Witch, so it was an absolute joy to see her in this as well, even though I think this came before The Worst Witch. But I do think that the film, the TV special, isn't quite the same as being absorbed in this book and reading these really powerful words and picturing it yourself. But certainly it is also quite moving. I think for me, as a younger reader, I only read it once as a child, and I think it was too much. I was primarily used to reading things like Sleepovers and The Worry Website and Lola Rose. Well, maybe Lola Rose is quite dark and hard-hitting, but some of the more tame, softer stories where there are still problems, but people aren't rubbing toxic paint all over themselves. So I really like it, but I think it's a challenge. The vocabulary is not. I feel like the vocabulary is in line with the average Jacqueline Wilson book that's aimed at the kind of 7 to 12 market. But for me, this is one of the most emotionally moving. and therefore most challenging. So very well written, very well put together, with a brilliant narrative that's told exceptionally well. If you haven't read it and you like Jacqueline Wilson books, definitely give it a go. Just, I would say, be careful if you approach it with an open mind, but just be mindful of the fact that it could be a little bit difficult to read depending on where you're coming from. But either way, I have nothing but praise for it. It is an absolute triumph.